Hi, my name is Jeremy Krause and I am the VP of Client Services at Situation. Thank you for tuning in today for what should be a very exciting discussion that we are calling Trailblazing in a Time of Uncertainty. We all know that the theater industry has been hit hard and knocked down by this pandemic, but we certainly have not been knocked out. And I think that is evident by some of the really exciting and innovative virtual theater that we are seeing being done by theaters, artists, and producers around the country. And today we have some people here that are at the forefront of it that we're going to hear from shortly. But before we get started, I wanted to play a 5-minute excerpt for you from the president and founder of Situation, Damian Bazadana, who had a lot to say on this topic a few weeks back during one of our events with Google. Take a listen.
The creativity right now is going really quickly in an exciting way and paving new ground. It's like a Wild West, and consumers are seeking out connection, and they're doing it virtually in massive numbers. And that's for the live events business, that is a monster idea if we really think through it. But every time I have this conversation, I'm reminded of a gigantic headwind that kind of hits me right in the face every time I bring it up. And it's the ability to scale is also the biggest tension for the live events business, because we are a scarcity-driven business. Not all, but many that are on this call today are driven by this idea of scarcity. The entire business model for most of the people on this call is to maximize some version of a revenue per seat. Theaters often will unscrew the seats and take them out of a venue in an effort to maximize revenue. I mean, really think through that idea. Scale is like the kryptonite of scarcity. And so I believe, like right now where we are in the market and the conversations that I'm having with leadership, I believe this tension, this idea of scale versus scarcity is where the real innovation of this moment is going to shake out. And it's happening right now. And it's a reimagining, for example, of what connection means, a reimagination of what the word performance means, what relationship means, what community means, what revenue means, what lifetime value of a customer means, what our greater purpose means as a mission. And so the opportunity, the camp that I'm in, and I'm not going to say I know I'm right, but I know I'm right. The opportunity in front of us with scale through virtual connection is far greater than the risk. Live is going to come back. I believe it is going to flourish. And this, when I say live, I mean people aggregating into room. I'm obviously all in on that as part of my life and of my business, but undoubtedly, sitting side by side with it, the power of virtual connections it is at this moment a massive opportunity, which is in many respects the Wild West, and a massive opportunity for all. And I, in fact, would say that in 19 years doing business, there's been a lot of crappy things that have happened personally and to a lot of us on this call during this period of time. But I think right now, we have the ability to create arguably one of the most enriching virtuous cycles that we could have hoped for in our business moving forward. And I'll oversimplify it by saying it sounds a little like this, is that when we broaden, and using virtual connection as my grounding force here, when we broaden the stages and the ways in which we can connect with audiences, whether that's virtually or in person, we are broadening the capacity for diversity in the storytelling in which we can deliver. And when we broaden the capacity for the storytelling for which we can deliver, we are going to broaden the pool of storytellers who can ultimately tell those stories. And when we broaden the pool of storytellers on the stages or virtually or in person, I can assure you, we will broaden the range of audiences we will attract, both the people sitting in the seats and the talent in which potential employees, whether that's on stage or backstage. And when we broaden the types of audiences that we ultimately are attracting, we are ultimately going to strengthen the bond of these organizations in the local communities and the neighborhoods in which they aim to serve. This is the virtuous cycle that I think we need for our business. I think this is what everyone wants. I think this is what the people who work in the business want. This is what our audiences want. And this is what our communities need. And so for all the future leaders, I see the people who are on this call right now, the people who RSVP'd, the younger future leaders who are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, this is the moment. This is where we need you. The calling is right now, and here is your moment to innovate. because the rules of the past don't necessarily apply moving forward. And it's extraordinarily clear. There's a line by JFK that things do not just happen, things are made to happen. Innovate, engage, bring ideas. The market is ripe. The idea of scarcity of the old is not going to apply. And particularly the next couple of years, we got to innovate quickly, and we need to look at scale as an opportunity to broaden audiences.
I couldn't have said it any better myself, which is why I didn't try to. Now we're going to get started with our panel, and we're going to talk to some people who will let us know what they've learned, what they're working on now, and what the future holds in the virtual theater space. But before we begin, I want to bring in our fabulous moderator, the editor-in-chief of Broadway News, Caitlin Houston. Hey, Caitlin.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this panel today because while theaters are shut down, we've seen the rise and now the emergence of virtual theater. And our panelists today in particular have been leading that movement and leading that charge. And they've all taken a different approach to it, which is why I think this will be particularly interesting. So we have projects ranging from virtual concerts, virtual plays, all audio seasons, and they're all speaking to a wide a variety of audiences. So I can't wait to hear more on how they did it and where they see this going. And so with that, let's bring in our panelists.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Mahboob. I am an event producer and a line producer, and I'm currently working on a series, a digital concert series called Live from the West Side, which began in August of this year, 2020, and will continue through the fall and through the winter as well.
My name is Miranda Haymon. I'm a director and a writer and a producer. And in October, I helped co-curate and produce the Prelude Festival through the CUNY Center at through the Siegel Center at the CUNY. And I also had a piece present in that called Baby Brecht.
Hi, I'm Mandy Greenfield. I'm the artistic director of Williamstown Theater Festival, and we are making our 2020 season with the world's largest producer of audio content, Audible.
I'm Eva Price. I'm one of the lead producers of Jagged Little Pill. We are launching a live concert from New York City with Jagged Little Pill. I'm also producing a virtual hip hop Nutcracker season, which usually I produce on tour, but this will play to 46 venues across the country on subscriber screens. And I launched a on-demand virtual theater experience with the Story Pirates, which is also currently running for families ages 4 through 12.
I'm Danya Taymor. I'm a director and just became also a producer through working on Heroes of the Fourth Turning, a digital production that I worked on with Jeremy O'Harris and Will Arbery with an assist from Playwright's Horizons. And we brought that show, which we had run in the fall, to digital audiences a few weeks ago.
And I'm Jeremy O'Harris. I am generally a playwright, but have become sort of a producer during lockdown. And recently I just helped produce Heroes of the Fourth Turning with Danya, a show called Circle Jerk Live with the new theater company Fake Friends. I worked with Garage Magazine and Miranda Haymon, who's also on this call, to create a digital play that was presented with graduates of the 2020 class who never got their showcase. And I'm working with New York Theater Workshop on their Instigator Festival, which is really exciting.
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to have you all here. As you all mentioned, we have a very wide variety of projects on this panel. So I'd love to kick it off with just the question of what led you to create or produce or work on these projects during the shutdown, and what was your ultimate goal in doing these?
In the earliest, and I guess we could say kind of darkest days of the pandemic, when we really did not know what was going on and if it was even safe to breathe the air, I found personally, I couldn't really read books. I couldn't really watch television because I would tack toward the news. And I found listening to podcasts and audio products really the only way that I could engage my imagination. And it was really by virtue of my own experience of really needing to escape, really needing to listen, really needing to get out of my own head, that in a dark night of the soul of what will become of us in the American theater, I had this, idea to call Audible and say, let's make this season as an all audio season. The other piece of it is, as an artistic director, as we could see the future, and every day it felt bleaker and bleaker with very little work on the horizon for our artists, for our designers, for our writers, for our actors, for everyone in the American theater. I also felt a great obligation to find a way to get people paid, and to also make sure that their voices and their stories were heard. And we're the lucky beneficiaries of a partner with a global platform. So we're really pleased to be working with Audible on this.
I was going to answer your question by saying desperation to do something is sort of a piece of it. Jagged Little Pill was in its third month of performances, and every night it felt like you were at a rock concert. I mean, people stood up in the middle of the show, people felt things, people cheered, people sang along. And when we went dark and we started thinking about how can we get people paid, like Mandy had said, how do we keep the energy of that musical alive? How do we please fans? How do we, sing and feel again together in this very isolated time? We started thinking about, well, at the end of the day, Jagged Little Pill, though a beating heart of a musical, is actually based on an album, which leads pretty well to a rock concert. So we partnered with the new platform Stellar, which is founded by the folks who created Gold Star. Stellar is a ticketing and hosting platform that sort of acts like a venue and allows consumers to come, buy tickets, and experience something live. And over time, as I think many of us know, SAG-AFTRA and the film industry and the TV industry have sort of figured out how to safely shoot and bring actors together and create something. So we were able to find a virtual studios here in New York City, right in the heart of Broadway. We're able to partner with a wonderful platform that can help get our content seen and consumed around the country. And we had a fierce and courageous and beautiful group of singers and actors and dancers who were either living at home or living in New York or wanting to be together again and perform the show. So we decided to create Jagged Live, and we're thrilled that both our company and our fans are gonna have this experience together. And not to mention, we have a tour that this Broadway show will eventually go on across the country, in a year and a half or more from now. Under normal circumstances, it probably would have started sooner than that. And there are dozens of theaters around the country who also are looking for content, who one day will present our show either on tour or as a licensed musical many, many years from now. So we're teaming up with them. They're able to present our concert to their subscribers. They can take a piece of the ticket sales to help fund their programming with no cost to themselves. So very little risk and a lot of reward for a lot of people to finally come together with this glorious music and have a night.
I'd love to build on what Eva was just saying about these audiences nationwide. Many of us are all based in part or whole in New York City, and it's not easy, but it's easier to lose sight of the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of people across the country who are looking forward to their subscriber season at their local performing arts center or arts institution every year, and have found themselves really kind of bereft with nothing to enjoy and none of these wonderful tours to come through their town and see this great art. And we've established with Live from the West Side a way for those performing arts centers to engage with their subscriber base and to bring them new content that they can engage with and can consume safely from home. So similar to what Eva and Jagged Little Pill is doing, we are doing live concerts here in New York City, which are broadcast to all of the participating performing arts centers. Some of them are charging their patrons for it, $30, and some of them are giving it away as a gesture of, this is something that we want you to know is still here. One day we want you to be our subscriber. We want to be in the theater with you together, and here's something wonderful for you to experience. And the live concerts that we've been able to do so far and are looking forward to doing in the coming months have been a learning experience that is really it proves to us that people are still out there, and they really, really do still want to engage with the incredible artists and creators that have been left kind of high and dry, for lack of a better word, during this time.
What was at the core of this whole moment for me was that, like, we need new forms, right? Like, to quote Chekhov and Constantine, like the great searcher of new forms. I was really excited at the top of quarantine. I did a masterclass in New York Theater Workshop where I talked about how this shouldn't be a moment of pause for our industry. It shouldn't be a moment of like cocooning and hiding away. It should be actually a moment of like rapid change and evolution and embrace of the artistic spirit to create against all odds, right? To figure out some new way to connect with audiences. Because for me, this represented this opportunity to say, like, what is theater if it's not in a building sitting next to 100 to 300 people? What, right? Like, what else can it be? Where else can we experience those spaces of liveness? And so my goal since March of this year has been to empower young artists, especially, to think outside of the four walls of a theater downtown in New York, or, you know, downtown in Chicago, and think of like what can be that same, where can you connect with an audience outside of that? So is that cooking a meal for someone? Is that inviting people onto a Twitch live stream and watching you do a production of The Seagull with The Sims, right? Like a video game, which is what Celine Song just did in New York Theater Workshop. And so I went to New York Theater Workshop. I told them that I thought it would be really exciting to give artists money in this moment to create in any way they thought was might not ever make sense in any other time, and use this turn of the century moment to maybe push our industry to places that other artists have been going without very much pomp and circumstance for the last 2 or 3 decades, like Annie Dorson, and many others like her. I was gonna rattle off names, but there's no reason to do that. But Google multimedia theater artists, and you'll see there's been a lot of people who've been figuring out how to make liveness outside of the institution, and how can this be a moment that institutions could adopt that and support artists who are trying to create new forms.
Yeah, I would definitely echo a lot of what Jeremy said, particularly in my role as a co-curator of Prelude Festival. It felt really important, especially because Prelude does serve as a kind of prelude to the theater season. Prelude happens every year, and it usually happens in October before, you know, while the shows are rehearsing, and a lot of shows are then go into production. So it felt important to provide artists the opportunity to be able to prelude what had been on their minds and what they had been learning about their practice since March, and giving artists the funds and the money and the opportunity and the platform really to be able to do that felt significant, and it felt like a real intervention, not only in the time that it was, you know, what was that, like 5 months after, but also in general, now folks are able to say, I made work that was specific to online. Not necessarily, not saying that the adaptations and how folks, you know, like Heroes of the Fourth Turning, like what that has looked like, there's certainly value in that. But I also wanted to be able to provide a space where folks could say the genesis of this has been with this space in mind. So that way I can actually use the tools that I've learned and that I've seen others do to make work from the beginning that has always been meant for the online space. And then I think, to Jeremy's point as well, in terms of making new forms, this project that we worked on together with Gucci and Garage really was the opportunity to say, well, what do we have here, and what, again, tools can we use that fashion, that film, that theater, that viscerality can take in order to create something that exists at the nexus of something to be discovered. So I think that what's exciting about the projects that I've been working on have always been created with the intention of the moment, as opposed to an unfortunate circumstance.
Yeah, and I think I agree with all of that in terms of like the work that is being made for this moment. Like, I just have to shout out Circle Jerk again, which Jeremy produced, which was live, which felt, you know, started 10 minutes late, just like a downtown show, and you could feel the presence of others in the room, even though you guys you're disparate. There's something more incredible about that connectivity when you know, like, you're watching at the same time as somebody in a different country across an ocean. That kind of I don't know, it's a different feeling of collective, but it reminds me of that buzz I get, or I used to get in a building. And then one of the most remarkable things for me, and something that I hope really stays with us, is the change in accessibility. Like, for instance, like Heroes of the Fourth Turning is a show that was extended at Playwrights Horizons, but there's still a barrier of cost. Even if they have, you know, $20 tickets, that's still a barrier. And what we were able to do with Jeremy's help in the HBO Theater Fund is make all tickets free, pay the artists more than they were paid when they were doing the actual run of the show, but, you know, let it be open to anybody who needs access to this work. Theater, like, that's one of the hardest and probably worst things about it, is who gets to walk into the door of that building to witness something. And an incredible thing about this moment has been shattering those walls and creating access in a way that, you know, in our case was financially sustainable too. It was donation based, but we would have recouped the amount of Jeremy's investment simply on donations alone. But we were able to, because he paid everybody, to take that and put it into a fund for theater artists of all disciplines. So not just playwrights, directors, actors, but also technicians, like board operators, stage managers, people who want to be administrators, to keep those people inside of our industry in a precarious moment.
Well, and I'd love to launch off what you mentioned, Danya, which is that everyone is creating these virtual projects. You don't have the audience there in the room with you. You can't measure their reactions. So how do you create that feeling of being in the room in a theater, or do you do something different and not try and create that at all?
A different thing emerges where, because you don't have that hit of the audience response, something more honest happens, because you're just playing with the people that are in the piece of work itself. So in Circle Jerk, I could see that incredible joy and trust within the performers. And same thing in Heroes. They just had to, like, become a unified collective and play for each other.
There was such a digital outpouring for the audience in both of those shows, wherein, like, for Circle Jerk Live, we made it sort of like a necessity to live tweet it while you're there. Like, you know, who knew who might be in the on the Circle Jerk Live couch to talk about it, which felt like being both in the intermission, like, lobby talking about a play, but also whispering to your best friend right beside you, and being sort of naughty theater goers in the sense of, like, what theater decorum is for most people. But actually, for me, it felt most like being in a Black audience, right? For that like has grown up in the Black theatrical and Black church tradition of, like, call and response. And we saw that also in Heroes of the Fourth Turning, a show that's so quiet on stage and so dark that you feel like you can't even whisper or move a muscle when you're in Playwrights Horizons. It takes on an entirely different mode. And I think that was the biggest gift of this, because I think also, just thinking about accessibility beyond the price, there are people who genuinely, the people who are represented even in the play that we produce in Heroes of the Fourth Turning, people with, like, actual illnesses that make it very difficult for them to sit in a theater for 2 hours, right? And, like, the fact that theater has so rarely thought about how to take care of those audience members and welcome them in, when those are the people who teach us about theater, those are the people who write about theater, those are people who have grown up in and around the theater, I think makes this a really powerful moment for us to reimagine how to bring those audiences in and keep them in discourse with us.
And again, I think that so much of how we talk about this moment is lack of instead of abundance of. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been watching a show or watching an Instagram live, and I see, you know, Jeremy and I were always in the Baited with Z-Way DMs, and, like, people were having conversations. So just like the same way you go to a theater and you see someone there and you're like, hi friend, but then you sit across from each other and you don't get to talk until intermission. Instead, what things like Instagram and Twitch and Twitter and any social media platform actually provide the opportunity for that viscerality and for that immediacy, and the performance can go on. So actually it becomes part of the performance, and we're all witnessing the event together despite the distance.
And I think the really sort of extraordinary piece is, like, and what's to come, right? Because, you know, the idea that we can be the thing we used to be, the traditional, somewhat elitist, if not entirely elitist, happens in one place at one time, to which there is obviously a kind of sacred quality, right? We are all people who grew up making theater, and that there's something very beautiful that we cherish about that we don't want to dilute. But this isn't diluting it. It's almost like a prismatic sort of experience of theater where I think we're inviting audiences, larger audiences, more diverse audiences, geographically diverse, economically diverse, racially diverse, all of the diversities we want, to experience a piece of what we do, but in a different way that doesn't take away, it adds, right? And the really exciting tale is when we figure out how to put it all back together into kind of one integrated whole, I think.
I think we're creating more theater goers. We're creating more people that are hungry for content that they didn't realize they were hungry for because they didn't experience theater in the old way, which I think is actually very good for the future of the traditional live theater experience.
We've discovered that audiences across the country, they'll use something as simple as the chat feature on your streaming platform to engage with one another, whether it's just shouting out where they're from, what cocktail they've made. They will find ways to engage, and some of our artists will engage directly with them via social from the stage and say, take a selfie with me, take a selfie from your living room. I want to see you. I want to know who you are because you can't be here with me. And the flip side of that is that artists on the concert stage being live broadcasts are rapidly adapting to the fact that there is no audience. And there is so much for them to kind of chew on, and that you're used to there being at least 100 people in an audience. Even if you are recording something for TV, there's often a live studio audience, right? And this is just 4 or 5 camera guys, couple of producers, the lighting board operator, and whomever may else be there. And it's surprisingly emotional for a lot of people just to be in the room. But then there is this added hurdle as a performer for people to understand, how do I pace my show? How do I know if my joke is funny? Are they enjoying my content? It's tricky, but people are adapting really, really quickly. And it's fascinating and really wonderful to see that happening live, event after event.
Well, so then for all of these projects, how do you adapt the work to that medium? Or do you have to make changes to the format or the script to make it work virtually?
I think in our case, the best thing to do is to acknowledge that it's weird, right? It's very obvious that because of COVID protocols that have been obsessed over and established in these studio spaces in New York, that there are very few people in the building. And so most of the performers we've worked with have really embraced that and called it out to the audience to say, I'm here alone and it's weird, and that's okay. Because I know I'm not really alone. I feel alone, but I'm not alone. You're all here with me. And it sounds trite to say that in a way, but the collective that we speak of does it all have to be in the building? The answer is no, not right now. It doesn't.
The most important thing when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to use this money to actively help out shows that would be happening in a traditional sense all over like the downtown and off downtown space in New York. The most important thing to me became making sure that I was helping and enhancing work for the digital landscape that had the same sense of expanse and ambition as work that I was hoping to produce in that off-Broadway space in a more traditional sense. So that came down in a lot of ways to design and the design imagination of the artists I was working with. And looking at the work that Danya did with her designers on Heroes of the Fourth Turning, for me, made it an obvious choice as something I would want to invest in, right? Because it wasn't just people making a show over Zoom that felt like a reading and not an actual experience, right? An actual show. It's the same with the boys from Circle Jerk. I mean, the collective of Circle Jerk. They came to me and they were like, we're going to do 13 like remote controlled cameras that will be working in this way. Here's what our set design looks like. This is what our costume budget is. If you gave us an extra $5,000, we could actually get good wigs. And I was like, great. Like, that's what I want. Like, I want it to feel like someone is taking the time to treat this like it's theater, right? Like it's our livelihood. Like it's the thing that we like cry about, right? Like, and I feel like, especially at the very beginning, because so much of the work we were doing was about just like connecting with people and just doing something to do it, there wasn't that attention to detail. There wasn't that same rigor that like is demanded of someone doing their first big show off Broadway, right? And I think that now that we've gotten used to it, that this is becoming a new normal in a sense. I'm starting to see people elevate those things, right? Like, you know, the level of design that was even put into Celine Song's show on over Twitch, right? Her version of The Sims, like went beyond just her personal design of The Sims via the app as the game exists right now. She also went out and found a designer who could make a mod specifically for her show so she could have real seagulls inside of the show. Like that type of elevation and recognition of what you're going to need to do a show is something that happens when you're not on a computer. So make sure it's happening when you're on a computer, right? Like those are the things that matter to me.
Very, very similarly, you know, when we announced that we were doing our season with Audible, you know, I did have a couple of, you know, sort of moments of dreaded feedback, like, oh, cute radio plays, right? And I was like, no, you know, that's not what we're doing. These are engineered for the ear. They are designed for the ear. So we have our playwrights who, yes, did originally conceive this work for 3 dimensions and for the stage, but they are re-examining the words, re-examining the plays, and in some really profound ways, rewriting the plays. Our directors are imagining a kind of oral landscape, and our sound designers are the painters of it, right? I mean, what our sound designers on the Audible project have brought to the process has been breathtaking. And it's been really exhilarating to watch theater directors kind of step into, you know, a post-production, almost filmic, cinematic way of working so closely with sound designers to bring you into a space. We're bringing you into a space through your ear, you know, and it's I think exercising muscles and musculature that can only grow from here in a really dazzling way.
What makes it virtual theater as opposed to a movie? Why, you know, we're all talking about it as virtual theater, but, you know, you're watching it on a screen. Can you talk a little bit about what it is that you think makes this theater rather than, let's say, a movie or a TV show that you're watching?
I can talk about that with one of my on-demand projects, which is with the Story Pirates. This idea came about because as an adult, I was having trouble sleeping when this all began. And I had a feeling that so were kids. And I said, well, let's make a theater show for kids that sort of takes away the pain and the hassle of going to bed and makes it fun and cool. So we created what we call the Dreamtime Travel Kit that gets mailed to every purchaser of the show. So that suddenly creates a 3-dimensional experience back at home, which I think is related to theater. And we created a full immersive show. And through that sort of theatrical and delightful experiential storytelling, we were able to utilize the elements of the kit that gets sent home. So that directly related to the storytelling. So that was one way that we really felt that we were creating theater and not a television or a film show, because we're doing the things theater does best. We're drawing on the audience to have their own experience along with us, rather than sort of telling them what their experience was going to be, which is what I think makes theater beautiful.
I think too, for me, this question is like built around so much of this sort of like, this deep ignorance about what our form is and the history of our form, right? And every time I hear that question, I'm like, wow, like this person seems to not know that like a play was once just a closet drama. Like for years and years and years, plays were just something you read, right? And at the very beginning and onset of television and filmmaking, when people gave words to these people and film became something closer to theater, that was seen as like a big untoward thing in the world of cinema, right? Like cinema was not a place where people did plays that were shot. Which is essentially what early films were. And so I think that, like, you know, in this moment of thinking about how our form can grow, I think that we cannot limit it to what theater has been ostensibly for 90 years, right? Like, or 100 years. For 100 years, basically, we've done plays that were like psychological realism that like happened in a space like the stages we do now, in the dark, in the quiet, yada, yada, yada. But for many years, text, like there have been so many movements of theater artists that have done a litany of things with the work that they were doing that would blow your mind as to like how they might function as theater. Right now, I'm wearing my newest play, right? I shouldn't be telling people this, but I'm doing a collection and every piece has a line on it from my newest, from the new play I just wrote. And each line creates a whole universe around the piece of apparel you're in, for me. And that is in relationship to like a 1940s literary movement of theater makers who like wrote plays on strips of paper and tacked them onto their clothes, right? And so I think that in this moment, we can't limit what a play is or isn't based on what other people want to project onto it. It's not a Netflix drama because I say it's not a Netflix drama. It's not a movie because I say it's not a movie. I say it's a play, therefore it's a play. You know, and I think that can be the simple answer for anyone who has that frustration right now. Like, what makes a play not a movie? The fact that I didn't call it a movie.
That's exactly right, Jeremy. And also I feel that kind of what makes this a play and not a movie is also operating from a place of scarcity and frankly competition, which in my mind is a product of supremacy. That idea that theater artists have been, for, you know, financial reasons, are afraid of artists leaving and going to film or going to TV, right? And this wanting to protect the form so desperately that we've turned the form into something that ultimately, and frankly, still is inaccessible, upholding white supremacy, and frankly, cannot actually reach people where they are at. And they have to come to it. So if we, the royal we, weren't so afraid of theater leaving or going away, the abundance and the opportunity that we would have to be able to take from all mediums and say, this is a play because it's happening in a theater. Or this is a play, like Jeremy said, because I said it's a play. I highly encourage everyone to go and look at Cakewalk, which is the Gucci and Garage piece that Jeremy and I collaborated on with graduates from the 2020 grad school acting programs, because we said it's a play because it's in a black box, but there were 2 cameras and there was a fashion shoot going on upstairs. And I, as the director, was also wearing Gucci and directing people. So it was this kind of also, if you were in the room and if you were one of, you know, our costumers or one of the actors, it took place in Irondale because we said, you know, for safety reasons, we needed as big of a space as possible. But actors are 20 feet away saying their lines so that way we can get one shot. Is that not a play? Just because we're capturing it and there's a camera next to us and capturing, you know, what's taking place. A live event still took place in order to even get that product. So there actually were 4 things that we were able to get out of that, even though no one necessarily saw our play.
To put it really simply, I think to build on all of this is theater captured on film or television in that format is still theater. It doesn't become negated by the medium by which it's captured and distributed, right? And audiences in 2020 are hungrier than ever to consume theater in their homes. And we have created this equalizer by beginning to really capture this medium and distribute it in this way. And I think we have to put a little bit of the onus on the audience to say, this is theater and you have to embrace it as theater because we've created it as theater, and you might be watching it not in the theater, but it is theater.
I also think that it denies the camera as a theatrical tool to say anything that's captured is essentially film. You know, what I learned about how to use a camera working on Zoom, you know, I'm ready for my TV show. Like, there is no barrier between these storytellings. These are just all different tools to do the same thing. So for me, in talking about like abundance, Miranda, this is finally a moment where I feel like for a lot of us, I'll speak for directors, it's like, oh no, you've been trying to limit us to one form, as you say, but actually we're boundless. If we can tell stories, we can tell stories. And so that's kind of the point. And so it's been really refreshing for me to lose the fear of the camera, or lose that sense that what people tell you, like, oh no, that's a different medium. You're like, no, actually it's just a tool to create access. It's a tool to see into somebody's soul in a different way. And it can be incredible. So I'm with you on that.
And I just want to say one thing too. I feel so lucky that I got to study drama extensively right next to one of the greatest art schools in the country, because I spent more time at the Yale School of Art than I did at the Yale School of Drama. And one of the things I learned sitting with their photographers, sitting with their painters, sitting with their sculpture departments was that the art world for so many years had freed itself of so many chains that the theater world constantly bounds itself to. Right. And like, you can go to an amazing painting crit and watch a young painter who's completely amazing with oil and watercolors and anything they want, do a performance and tell you that's their new painting. Right. And have this discourse about it being a painting from that lens. And I found myself often going to class and trying to do those things in the world of the theater school and being like my wrist was slapped a lot and they were like, that's not a play. And I was like, but I was just in the art school and they said that was a painting and no one said it was a painting. They're like, well, this is theater. We don't do it that way. And I think I left drama school being like, but why can't I treat drama like art, right? And I think this is a moment where everyone's getting to open up the art box and see theater like art,
You all have much more sophisticated and evolved ideas than I think I do, because I actually just find myself kind of rooted in something like quite old fashioned, which is that like, yes, everything that you're saying is true. And of course, I believe I am there. I am with you. And yet still all of our work, right, is conflict expressed through dialogue that yields some kind of catharsis. That is still what we're all doing, right? In whatever format. And therefore, it is theatrical. It is using the mechanism of the human experience rendered through dialogue to expose conflict and get us moved to see something new about ourselves or about someone else. And change our hearts and minds. And that's in every form. I've seen all the work you've made. That's what everyone's still doing. It's just taking a slightly different shape. I have, I guess, a bias against, in some ways, film, which I think relies often on pictures for that, right? Like pictures and picture and, visual, the visuals are the delivery mechanism so often in film for catharsis. And I'm not sure any of us is actually doing that, right? Like it still feels like we're rooted in language and dialogue and exposure of the human experience and a kind of obligation each of us feels as theater makers, in whatever form we want to be theater makers, to show something new about the human experience, to change hearts and minds. And so, I don't know, maybe I'm just so bloody old fashioned, it's sad, but there you have it.
No, you're right.
I also think that we're seeing, maybe not necessarily in name, but as someone who studied German, I'm really thinking about the notion of a Gesamtkunstwerk, or the total work of art. So, here I'm actually in this conversation is making me realize that like we are having a kind of renaissance of the total work of art, of the Gesamtkunstwerk, and we are seeing how many different elements come into play where we get to have it all. We honestly, as my improv troupe used to say, it's yes and. Why can't we just keep saying yes and?
Yeah. I was in an improv group. Let's have an improv group.
Everyone was in an improv troupe or has been.
I didn't get into the improv group.
I am terrible at improv. But to end up this panel, I'd like to put one question to everyone, and then we'll sadly be out of time, which is, will you continue to do virtual or this kind of theater after the shutdown?
I definitely will. I mean, I was doing this type of theater before the shutdown. And people in New York might not know that because they didn't see all my shows. But, the show I did last summer that happened in one house for one person, I feel like exists more as a photo book than a play, right? Like it was a play that I did privately for 30 people in a house on Fire Island. And the space where an audience will actually interact with that, a larger audience, a real audience to me will actually interact with that, is in this photo book I collaborated on with Matthew Leafite. I also think that in the coming months, the things that we're going to see out of this work are going to make it undeniable that people are going to have to start programming this kind of work and putting space for it. And I want to be a part of that programming. And I can't wait for everyone to watch the show I do on Chatterbait in a couple weeks.
I've always loved challenging myself and challenging the audiences and challenging the artistic directors and the consumers and the presenters to look at things differently and do things differently. And what this time has taught me is that I'm good at it. I enjoy it. I have lots of ideas of how to do it. And so I'm not going to stop. I don't know what format it will take exactly. Will it live virtually online? Maybe. Will it live, through other digital technologies? Will it have an immersive component? Will it be streaming of on demand or something live with live chats? But it is now inherent to the work I'm making for the future as well, because I can't think about a future piece of work without thinking about, well, what happens when a pandemic happens, or what happens if we can't leave our houses, or what happens if people are infirm and want to experience the show without leaving their houses. So I think it's going to be layered into all of the work's journey, be it the marketing of the work, be it the prologue to the work itself, be it within simultaneously to the work. I can't say what format it will take, but it has absolutely shifted the way I think about theater creation.
I fully believe that we will continue to do live theater to be broadcast through the performing arts centers and arts institutions fully, because not only have we discovered such a beautiful hunger for it and enjoyment of it, but just as we spoke about as a group earlier, there's an accessibility component that's really, really spectacular and really, really wonderful to see that someone may want to go see Norm Lewis sing all of these incredible songs and do this beautiful 75-minute concert, but they can't come to New York. They can't spend $100 to go to Carnegie Hall. They can't stay in a hotel. But if they can have close to that same experience and consume this beautiful thing that they've always wanted to see from the comfort of their home for maybe as little as $30, and still experience it with their family and friends together at home, we've created, we've broken an accessibility barrier. And I don't think by any means it waters down or it corrupts the live experience of coming together in the theater. I think if anything, it will broaden what becomes the larger commercial audience and create more theater lovers and theater people who are hungry for theater in the process. Because someone who might not have wanted to go to that live concert might walk through the living room and sit down, and 5 minutes might turn into 10, might turn into an hour. And now we have a new person who has a love of live performance in theater. And I think we'd be unwise to let go of that opportunity.
I also want to add that I do believe, and I think if you ask just anybody walking down the street, like most people have had some interaction with being in a play at some point in their lives, be it at a level with just their siblings in their backyard or in a school, and everybody has this like first primer experience with theater, and it touches them, and then they move away from it for many of the barriers we've been talking about because of money or location or any of these things. So yes, like we're going to create new lovers of theater, but we're also going to like retouch all these people who have already been touched by theater and remind them of that it is one of those like basic human instincts, is to either perform yourself or witness something as a group. And so I think this virtual stuff has to continue so that we can activate those audiences who are already there for us. There is a hunger for this kind of work that can only be reached through widening the net of accessibility and breaking down barriers of form between different things.
I think change is air, and it only gets better from here. We'll just keep breathing and find where we're taken. You know, we'll that's the nature of theater, people. Just keep evolving.
Can I also make one plug really quickly for all the theater makers who are watching this? Jordan Tannehill, who's a Canadian playwright and someone I'm obsessed with, wrote a book that I think is amazing for everyone to read in this time called Theater of the Unimpressed. And basically the main premise of this book is like, why is it that people say that video games are fun, but theater is a chore, right? Like theater should be something that's fun for people. When you talk to people about going to see a play, they're always like, I don't know. Like, I really should see more theater, but I haven't. Like, no one says they should play more video games, but they haven't, you know? But they treat this thing that's actually fun like a chore, and he shapes all of the reasons why that might be. And I think this moment is a moment where we could, like, convince some of those people who see theater as a chore that maybe it's not, because we get to be very diverse right now and inclusive in, like, what our plays look like and are about and who the audience can be. So I just want to put that out there. Read that book. It's a great book, great primer.
So I think that's a good place to wrap up. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this panel. I feel like we learned a lot about what you're all doing and where this art form is headed. So with that, I will sign off. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.